Theme parks and wait times go together like burgers and fries. You can't have one without the other. As enthusiasts, we're privy that certain days are busier than others, and we also know that certain rides are busier at various points in the day. Now, sometimes you can avoid that line with a skip the line pass, but other times it just doesn't make sense or it's just not available. So today, I'm counting down the 13 longest queue lines I have ever waited in. Kicking off this list is Splash Mountain at Magic Kingdom. In 1998, I waited 90 minutes for what I consider to be the best log flume in the world. Now, this first visit to Disney World was before the advent of FastPass, so 5-year-old me had to endure a 90-minute wait to ride this log flume. Kudos to my dad for keeping me entertained, but the ride was well worth it. Nightmare at Great Escape also had a 90-minute wait in 2000. Nightmare always had a nightmarish queue. The building today is now used for a haunt with the same name, but it once held a horribly inefficient Schwarzkopf Jetstar. Even on a dead day, we had to wait 90 minutes. I've heard horror stories about this line getting up to 2.5 hours on weekends. Due to rumored issues with the braking system, this ride only could run 2 to 3 cars and only 2 riders per car. As an 8-year-old, this line was hell, and I remember the ride being awful. Since it was enclosed, I couldn't brace myself for the high-speed turn after the drop. In 2016, I waited 90 minutes to ride GhostRider at Knott's Berry Farm. I tried to rope drop this wooden coaster, however, it was closed. When we finally saw it operating later in the day, it had a 90-minute wait. Everything else in the park was a walk-on, so we didn't think Fastlane made sense in this case. I only was able to get one ride in GhostRider that visit, but it was exceptional. In 2018, I waited 90 minutes for my first ride in Steel Vengeance. And if you're familiar with Steel Vengeance in 2018, you know that queue line was particularly awful because they didn't allow cell phones in line. So how did I keep myself busy? I smuggled a Sports Illustrated magazine in my pocket, and the operators were completely fine with that, even though it bulged out more than my phone. The wait was still miserable because I was so excited to ride Steel Vengeance, but it was worth it. It was so good, it forced me to buy Fastlane Plus in every future visit so I wouldn't have to endure that queue again. A passing thunderstorm hit Hershey Park during my visit last year, so we didn't have too much we could do during that time. We decided to hit the new for 2019 dark ride in Reese's Cupfusion because every outdoor ride was closed. Now this line moved extremely slow. Every other train was filled with fast track. But it was a nice dark ride, and it's not like we could do much else, so the 90 minutes wasn't the worst time spent. At Tivoli Gardens, I waited 90 minutes to ride Vertigo. Vertigo is a one-of-a-kind flat ride, and many consider it to be one of the most intense flats on the planet. It pulls some serious G's and has a ridiculously long cycle, and that last part holds true even if one of the 2 arms is closed. So I had to wait 90 minutes because the ride only seats 4 people when one arm is down, and it still had the 5-minute cycle, but it was every bit as good as people say. I also waited 90 minutes at PNE Playland to ride the coaster. If you're familiar with Playland, you know this park gets slammed during the PNE fair, and unfortunately, coaster was down to just one available train last year. The result was a full queue all day. I was able to use a rapid pass to skip the line for my first ride, but the ride was so amazing that I willingly waited in a 90-minute queue 4 separate times. And that queue was brutal since it was completely unshaded, but it was worth it for coaster. The next 3 experiences all took 2 hours. In 2008, we visited Hollywood Studios, and that was the opening year for Toy Story Mania. By the time we got to the park, it was all out of fast passes. With no other option, we waited in the 2-hour queue line. The line moved really slowly, but it was well themed. And since the shooter was unlike any other I had been on to that point, I had no regrets experiencing that novel ride system. In 2008, I also waited 2 hours to ride Superman. Usually I know to visit Six Flags New England on quieter days, but my friends wanted to go on a Saturday into the peak of summer. I wasn't going to say no. And Superman had a full queue, but we just couldn't visit the park and not ride Superman. We knew it was an incredible ride, so we didn't necessarily mind waiting. The other one I want to talk about is my 2-hour wait to get into La Ronde. Yes, this isn't for a ride, this is the actual line to get into the park. It took me 2 freaking hours to get through the security line. I'm showing a montage of this horrific line, but it stretched beyond the bus station, passed through multiple switchbacks on its way to the entrance. Needless to say, I needed a flash pass once inside the park. In 2006, I waited 2.5 hours to ride Volcano the Blast Coaster King's Dominion. My first visit to this park unknowingly occurred on a day when bank employees could visit for free, so it was slammed. Since Volcano was a bucket list ride for me, I didn't care how long I had to wait. I was riding in the front row. The coaster was short, but it was really unique and a rush from start to finish. In 2008, I was at Islands of Adventure, and this was shortly after Ripsaw Falls was retrofit with lap bars. We had express passes on that day, but they weren't valid for Ripsaw Falls. We ended up waiting 2.5 hours to ride this log flume. This was due to the slashed capacity and numerous breakdowns. Again, it was a fun ride, and thankfully, it has been close to a walk-on in future visits, but I'll never forget that grueling 2.5 hour wait the first time I rode it. Coming in at number 1 is another ride at Islands of Adventure, and that would be none other than Hagrid's Magical Creature Motorbike Adventure. Last year, we had to wait 3 hours to ride it, and it broke down after those 3 hours. When we entered the queue, the line had been moving fast. We made it pretty deep into the queue when we were notified of a temporary delay. That short delay then morphed into an extended delay, and later an indefinite delay. After 3 hours, they evacuated the queue line, but we were given express passes to return. We noticed something peculiar, though, as we were being evacuated. The ride was still testing. So we hung around, and not even 15 minutes later, the ride reopened. So we were able to ride back-to-back, once standby and once with the express pass. So really, we only had to wait 90 minutes per ride, which doesn't sound as bad. The whole queuing process was frustrating, but the ride was so good we didn't mind. So those are the longest queue lines I've ever had to wait in. What are the longest queues you've ever had to wait in? I'd love to hear your comments down below. Thanks for listening and subscribe for more coaster videos here at Canopy Coaster.